So yeah, when we talk about burnout, it really wasn't until I read your book, The Emotional Overdraft, that I kind of everything just started. I could see this cropping up in my life, like not just, oh, recently think I've had a bit of burnout, and actually I think I've been in this emotional overdraft. I was like, actually, like, whoa, this has happened your entire life. It was a bit of a wake up call, really.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Exploring Emotional Overdraft. And today I have the generous, kind, smart Vicki Young with me. And Vicki is the owner and chief creative officer at Nalla, which is an award-winning branding agency. She's been Entrepreneur of the Year, and she works with brands such as Vodafone, New Look, EY over the years. So she's worked with loads of big brands. And Vicki and I met when I posted an article about burnout on LinkedIn. And Vicki replied within minutes with a very substantial reply about her experience. And on the back of that, we got chatting, and it's taken us a few months, but we finally got together to have a conversation about it. So I'm really, really excited to talk because I know that Vicki's got a point of view that you'll want to hear. First of all, welcome, Vicki. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
Delighted. Could you, it's really helpful for people to understand a bit about your background and how you got to where you are, because that sets the context for how everything else happened. So could you just share that?
I think me as child, if we're going back that far, from a sort of normal, I'd say, working class family, I was the only one in my entire family to go to university, where I studied graphic design, worked incredibly hard, graduated with first class, and went on to do various internships at quite reputable agencies, the partners, who no longer exist, but did exist for a while, Design Bridge as well, which is now Design Bridge and Partners, before I landed my first permanent role at an agency called Someone. From Someone, I then moved on to get a role at the Partners, where I worked, and I would say that was my first, I guess, pinch point in my life where things got challenging, and I was definitely in my emotional overdraft, but I didn't know that concept at that time or what the term burnout meant. So that was where I first encountered.
And roughly how long ago was that?
So I would have been 28, 27, 28 at the time. So I'm now 42. So a few years ago now.
Brilliant. So from the Partners, were you there a little while, weren't you? And then,
Yes, I was only there for a short time. Basically, I'd say my burnout was a combination of burnout and grief. My father died quite suddenly while I was at the Partners, and I was due to get married 8 weeks later. So it was all quite an intense time, being at a new firm, quite a demanding role. Being a designer at the Partners, anyone who has worked for the Partners will be nodding their heads in agreement. And the kind of almost getting married, and then I also moved house. That was all lined up after I got married as well. So it's a combination of different things that certainly made me feel like completely burnt out. And at that point, I did quit my job. I went jobless for a bit while I realigned my life in terms of what was important to me and what I wanted.
and hugely interesting. And I'm so sorry about, losing your father. That sounds overwhelming is the word that was in my head when you were it must have felt overwhelming,
Yes.
marrying, moving house, losing your father. I when my father died, which is a long time ago now, but I was in a meeting. I remember the meeting I was in. I remember the room I was in, and someone came in and told me there's a message from your mother, and I knew what it meant. And I finished the meeting, and
Oh, wow.
I think I might have finished my day, and then I drove back to Brighton where my parents lived, and you don't know how to behave, and it's
No.
a very difficult,
Yes.
tough thing. So I can imagine the overwhelm of that, and you're not necessarily at your most marshaled in terms of your thinking at that point. But interesting that you then said, I need to step out of this. I need to detach myself from the stuff that's happening so that I can take a breath and take a beat and pause. Is that how it felt at the time, or did it feel less planned than that?
Interestingly, for me, I've always been someone that really pushes himself quite hard in terms of performance. I would say I expect a lot from myself, and I always strive to be really the best version of myself in absolutely everything that I do. I always give everything 110. And I think for me, weirdly at the time, how I felt was that I was so embedded in grief and overwhelm that I quit my job because I felt like I couldn't give them what they needed. So again, I was still, and I stopped working for a bit. I just was unemployed for a very short period of time, I'd say, on reflection. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, I've been unemployed for a month. And I wasn't looking for work because I felt like whoever hired me, I wasn't good enough, and that I wouldn't be able to perform at the level that I should be able to. So I didn't want to take any design job because I just didn't think I was good enough to do it well enough, because of this overwhelming feeling that I had.
That's so interesting. I mean, lots of what you describe is it's just so interesting that you set those high standards, and for yourself, that your expectations for yourself are so high. That sets you up for great success potentially, but also for very high levels of overdraft, of emotional overdraft. I'd say, and just for anyone listening who doesn't know what an emotional overdraft is, I define it as when you're subsidizing the success of your business or your venture at the cost of your own mental or physical well-being. So that's mental or physical health. So that's what when we're referring to emotional overdraft, that's what we mean. But I think if you're someone who expects, do you demand more of yourself than you do from other people even? Do you expect to set the higher standard? Yeah. And that's an absolute recipe for an emotional overdraft, because you can always justify working harder. You can always justify doing more. You can always justify extra all the time. It's very hard to step away. So I'm interested that you, at that relatively young age, when you became overwhelmed, you did manage to go, no, I've got to detach from this. And that's not to get to that stage, but you didn't really have much choice. That wasn't a career and a business and family piling in. That was a set of very specific circumstances. But you had the intelligence, the emotional intelligence to go, I need to detach from this and give myself some time to heal instinctively, I think. So there's a lesson in there, and I'm not a psychoanalyst, so I don't want to go into that. But I just think for everyone listening, there's the first lesson here is sometimes you need to choose to step away, and not to the point where you're forced to step away. It shouldn't be when a doctor says, no, you can't go to work for 3 weeks. Sometimes if you can spot it and do something sooner, then it's going to be more helpful. It's not a fully formed thought. Apologies, Vicki.
No. I think at the time it was although it felt like the right choice. On reflection, it was a very brave thing to do. To suddenly be like jobless. At the time, I was newly married and renting with my husband, so we didn't have mortgage or any children or anything. But it was quite interesting that really from that moment of pause was when Nalla was born. So it was almost sometimes a sort of blessing and a curse, really, because by stepping away, it allowed me to really have time to think about what I wanted, what was important to me. And at the time we lived in an area near, I think it's Clissold Park Graveyard, I think it is, in Stoke Newington. And it's a really old graveyard, loads of really interesting, walking through there, this sort of cemetery. And I noticed that the ages of the people on the graves were sort of young, essentially. A lot of people, dying at war and around that kind of period. And it made me really reflect on being like, wow, you don't actually have much time. Like, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do to make a difference? And that's that kind of momentum propelled me to be like, actually, I've got a deep passion for design. I always wanted to eventually run my own agency. I thought I'd start it in my 40s, but why don't I start it in my 20s? Let's give it a go. And that's the beginning, I guess, of the next chapter, really.
The mission and the purpose sort of came together, and in that moment of reflection, and that's so helpful. I think this is not, for any scientists listening, this is now not scientifically correct, but I heard it described this way and it works for me, which is the idea of our conscious mind and our subconscious thinking. And someone once said to me, 90% of your thinking goes on in your subconscious. And I sort of point to the back of my head. It's that the bulk of your brain is doing subconscious work and we're not aware of it. And there's this 10% at the front that's doing the conscious work. And when you're constantly pushing everything into the 10%, trying to think it through, being out of flow, trying to be conscious about every decision, you limit the amount of capacity you have to really actually make amazing decisions and to think through to your full capacity. The second you give yourself permission to leave it in the big bit at the back of your brain, the subconscious, and I know it's not at the back, but then really interesting things start to happen, and your result was this idea of a this mission which became your agency. Wouldn't have happened if you'd been working at the Partners and you'd carried on working and you'd just been busy and giving your 110% the whole time. It possibly wouldn't have happened till you were 40, or if at all.
Yeah. And I also feel like the freedom I had at 20 was that I wasn't afraid. I felt like, well, I couldn't do anything. I'm jobless. I'm young. I wasn't afraid of anything. And I think as you get older, it becomes harder because you've got commitments that you need to deliver upon. You've got a mortgage to pay. You've probably got children. So actually, in a way, I was very lucky that I was in my 20s and had this freedom to take those risks and not be scared by it at all, because I could give it my all. And if it didn't work out in a couple of years, it didn't matter. And I had family who thought I was absolutely crazy at the time, because it was sort of around the time of sort of recessional 2010. They thought I was absolutely nuts to even try. So I didn't really, the tide was against me, so it didn't matter if I failed. But of course, I didn't fail, of course. Hence, I'm sitting here.
There's a good point in there as well, isn't there? Which is, I'm going to caveat this because you just said you walked through the graveyard and you saw how young everybody was. And so, we need to get on with it. We have this limited amount of time, but we do kind of feel like we can do anything in our 20s. I think generally the sense of anything's achievable. We haven't had many of the knockbacks yet. We haven't had the experience of life that chains you and limits you and all those things. So it is often easier to make those decisions because you're unemployed but not unemployable. So you think, well, if I have to, I'll go and get a job. And there's no one depending on this, and I can go for it. And I'm backed by my husband, who's supporting me. I assume he did. I mean, it sounds like it. So, whereas at 45, when you've got the mortgage and the kids and all the other commitments and the financial products, and you're thinking about pension and all those other things you have to think about, it becomes more difficult. But in actual fact, it shouldn't, in a way. Yes, there are more commitments, but you're also so well equipped when you're 15 years into running your business. Now you're so well equipped to make better informed decisions, to know the consequence of what you might be planning. I wonder if sometimes we use I've got all these commitments and responsibilities as a bit of an excuse, because the flip side of that is we've got an awful lot of capacity we can tap into personally, which would help us make possibly much more informed decisions than we did at 25.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, but we always, as human beings, we're kind of programmed to look at the tangible things, the house, the money, the kind of time, I guess, aspect as well. And we forget that actually we've got an incredible wealth of knowledge We kind of distrust ourselves a bit more, don't we? In a way.
I wonder if we learn that failure is bad. If we learn that, I can't afford to fail, I mustn't fail, failure is a bad thing. And yet everyone who knows about this says that we have to fail. You have to fail because that means you're pushing, you're exploring everything around you. And failure is just if you keep doing the same thing and failing, then, you're an idiot. But if you're learning from the failure and doing something different and improving with it, that's, again and again, we hear stories about failure being a good thing to do, a good thing to have, because it means you're progressing. And I wonder if we start to fear failure.
Yes, I would say you probably do. I certainly feel like that in today's capacity, even when sort of pitching for new work and things. I kind of, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I care a bit more now. I'm not sure. Not sure what it is, but there's
But
definitely
what do
more
you care
heart.
about? What do you care about more?
I think I care more about losing what I've got, as opposed to when I was younger. It wasn't like that because I didn't really have much. If that makes sense. So I feel like I didn't have a fear of what, I guess, and also what anyone thought, because I was only 20 something. So, it doesn't matter what other people think, because I've done it and I've been, given it a go. Whereas I think when you're in your later years, there feels like, well, certainly for me, I feel more of a pressure to essentially live up to other people's expectations rather than just my own, if that makes sense.
We'll come back to this because I think this is, you've touched on something really important. But I'd like to hear the rest of, so 2010-ish, was it? You started Nalla?
2010 started Nalla. Yeah, and I sort of started from basically the lounge, and quickly picked up a couple of clients. And then I was like, oh, I need some help here. But so hired an intern. And then it was quickly like, oh, actually, we might need some office space. And so hired, got some office space in a shared space. And then was like, oh, we need a project manager to help me here. And before I knew it, we were, working with, FTSE 100 businesses, so, which was amazing, which led to, connections with, one of our largest clients, and still a client today, Informa, who are FTSE 50, I think now. Brands like EY, Waitrose, alongside obviously loads of other really great and talented smaller businesses that are kind of growing, from brand and marketing and growing their business. So yeah, so we sort of grew, and yes, I mean, I'd say we quite quickly, and I say relatively easily, got to over 1 million turnover in really quite a quick amount of time. With busy buddy studio, freelancers, growing team, it was great.
Oh, lovely. So it was great. Why do you say that?
I think we were doing really good projects. Everyone got on. It was around till 2017, and you'll find out what went down in 2018. But up to 2017, we were just flying. Everyone was happy. Projects were just coming in the door. We were winning everything. It was just easy in a weird way. Yeah, it was just, everything was easy. And we worked bloody hard, don't get me wrong. It was late, like, long hours, and often I'd maybe work weekends. It was but I loved it and I felt fueled by it, so it was great.
And that's interesting, isn't it? So you really loved it. It powered you up. You plugged into the business, and that gave you energy and power. Were you, at that point, do you think you were subsidizing the business with your own mental and physical well-being, or do you think actually it was a fair
100%. So, yeah, all of my energy really went into my business. It wasn't great on my marriage, because I was working a lot, and I didn't really see friends that much. Um, but I had this passion, for this thing I was forming, and I kind of, I guess, in a way, just became addicted to the energy of it and the sort of, um, excitement of it all. And it was never about money. It was always about doing great work. And we were just incredibly lucky that the money came with it as well. So yeah, it was, yeah, a buzzy time, but definitely if I look back now, I was addicted to the rush of it and was giving my all to something, um, that I guess in a way was perhaps banking that it would give back, um, which it didn't. The next chapter of my story didn't necessarily happen that, as I foresaw it.
So do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. So I guess in my vision, building this business, and it was then going to support me on my next life chapter, which was, having a family. Um, the challenge I had is that pretty much as soon as I started showing that I was pregnant, we couldn't win anything. It was like the tap of luck turned off. And it was the first time I met, discrimination, against female pregnant women. It was a time when, pitches were face to faces pre-pandemic, and we basically really struggled to convert. We had a Combined with that, we had a bit of bad luck with one of our clients' projects ended. They decided to stop the whole project, not just the branding piece, but the whole digital transformation piece. I decided to park it, for various business reasons, and so we were quite embedded in that project, and that was a big project that the kind of tap got turned off, and yeah, people just wouldn't hire us because this pregnant woman would be waddling in the pitch. So yeah, it was really challenging.
And do you, and that's horrible to hear and sort of not surprising in a way as well. Do you think that was what it all was, or was there more to it than that, do you think?
I think it was a combination of different things. I think me being pregnant was definitely and this isn't something that's just in my head, because I actually did have a client physically say, look, we really want to go with you, but we have to talk about the elephant in the room. We want you on the project, and we can see that you're pregnant, and we obviously want to work. We want to work with you, but you've obviously got a deadline, that doesn't necessarily work with ours. And I appreciate them being that frank, because that was the situation. But unfortunately, that that was sort of, I felt, said the unspoken kind of truth behind a lot of conversations that we had. I think equally, I think for years I'd been what I thought had been building a business, and I think on reflection, I was like, people still wanted to buy me as the head of a small agency, sole founder, no business partner. Had a really cool, great team, but I think even just the job title, people want to work with the top dog when it's a smaller agency. And so I think there was a sort of our own communication strategy on hindsight could have been worked on ahead of it all as well, I think.
I think that's what I was getting at. I don't doubt that there was prejudice, and clients are looking after their own careers, and they're not, if they perceive risk somewhere, even if it's a prejudice, then. But if they see the founder of the business stepping away, and that founder being pivotal to their success, then there's risk. They conceivably could perceive that as risk, and there's the thing. And what I talk about a lot to my clients is this idea of trying to make yourself redundant in your own business. So the founders particularly, if you can, it's brilliant to have a founder and it's great to have that escalation point for clients and they love that stuff. But the best thing you can do is go, yeah, but I set this thing up, but look who I've got here who's going to be doing this amazing work for you. And this is because then you can step away. And that's, but I guess if you're 110%, when you're giving everything, you're hooked on the drug of running the business, you're not necessarily in the moment going to see that.
100%. So, yeah, I definitely wasn't. I naturally liked to take ownership of a lot of stuff, go above and beyond my remit, creep into probably other people's spaces, workloads. And I think that's something that I will battle for my entire career, because it's baked into my personality, to be great at everything, even though I know I'm not. So I 100% agree that there was two things colliding, me needing to be out of the business, but also me not willing to be out of the business. So there was this fight, which going on. And yeah, I did take some time out, but really I was back within 3 months, and when I hear founders, leaders of the business sort of talking about taking a short time off, perhaps it's their first child and they haven't experienced it yet, I'm always a bit like, please remember burnout, please remember burnout, please remember burnout, because it is hard to be, in my case, breastfeeding a young child and also being at work, pumping. It was new to market, was this pump called LV, which is a silent breast pump, so no one knows you're pumping. And I thought that was the best thing ever. But on reflection, it was this kind of tool that allowed me to live in this kind of emotional overdraft space where I was pumping in toilets, pumping in meetings, pumping on the train, really not looking after myself, really stretching myself incredibly
almost
thin.
literally giving of yourself.
Yeah.
So that the business could have you.
Yes. Yeah. So, when we talk about burnout, it really wasn't until I read your book, The Emotional Overdraft, that I kind of, everything just started. I could see this cropping up in my life, like not just, recently think I've had a bit of burnout, and actually I think I've been in this emotional overdraft. I was like, actually, like, whoa, this has happened your entire life. It was a bit of a wake up call, really.
I'm so glad the book was helpful, and so sad that it needed to help you. But it's such a common problem that it's that's why it exists. So the business started struggling a little bit. Still producing amazing quality work, still working with some good brands, but adding new business was a problem.
Exactly. It was getting those new leads in the door, getting the clients whose kind of counter projects was a global brand. So it was therefore significant budgets and therefore resource, because the project was big. And so by kind of almost like cancelling a project like that almost overnight, many agencies have been in these shoes. It is a bit like, ooh. And the fact that I was pregnant and then I was out. So really I felt like I had to have the baby and almost rush back to work to push this boulder back up the hill, which we did. We did it. We we got the new leads in, we were speaking to big healthcare brands, it was all going. And we were getting back to where we were. And then something called the COVID-19 virus came along and changed the game yet again. And it was, as we all know, all agencies, all businesses had to change and adapt. Some thrived, some didn't in that changing landscape. That happened quite quickly. And at this time, I had a 2-year-old at home, and a mother that just been diagnosed with cancer that needed an operation. So it was, again, another challenging time on me trying to keep everything going.
Particularly with the mentality like yours, which is, I demand, if it's my own business, I demand I'm giving 110%. I expect to be involved in everything. I expect to be good at everything and be able to do everything and support everybody and have a family at home and support my wider family. And there's a lot of pressure you're putting yourself under at that point in a pandemic. And let's not forget, we did not know, did we, back at the start of that, what the world was going to look like in a week's time. I mean, I started my business a week before lockdown, and I had 3 clients who all laid me off immediately on my advice. I said, we don't spend the money, anything extra, just stop. And within 3 months, they'd all rehired me and everything was fine, but we had no idea what was happening.
Yes. There's a lot of pause on anything across the world. And we actually, we did, considering it was a pandemic, we did okay. I think we hit our targets and we grew by like 3% or something. So we did relatively well, compared to, and I think it was real potluck about what specialism you were in. It was kind of like if you were in events or anything like that.
Well, I had a client in the drink sector
Oh,
and
okay.
bars, and
Yeah.
that's a year of everything stopped. Literally for a year, nothing at all.
Oh no. Yeah. So so we did relatively well by then. But throughout that time I just kept being superwoman. And I was running a business. Really, I guess being a leader, I felt responsible for morale in the team and keeping people up and positive and bringing a lot to meetings, etc. And so I think by the time we come out of the sort of pandemic kind of periods, there was a bit of a boom in work again because lots of things been put on pause. But there's also a big shifts in more recent years, big shifts in sort of staff. There's lots of staff movements, which is stressful and unsettling for anyone working in agency when you're a kind of tight team, and there's lots of head changes and things. And then we had inflation, and then we had cost of living crisis, and salaries went up through the roof. So we had all these kind of different pressures on business owners of like, right, what's the best path? And for me, I feel like I'd built up on this overdraft for so long that it kind of really wasn't until 2020, sort of end of 2023, beginning of 2024 hit, where I was literally on my knees. I was just exhausted. Had a health scare myself, and it was like the straw on the camel's back. And I was literally like, I am now feeling like a different person. I withdraw. I didn't want to meet up with any friends. I was tired all the time. I didn't want to do anything socially. I was still turned up for work and gave as much as I could. But it was that point when I recognized again, I was a bit like, this has got a bit too far. You need time out. And so it became timeout number 2 of my
But you
career.
recognize this, and
Yes.
you made the decision to do that before it decided for you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I think that's when we were talking, wasn't it? I think I posted my article and you said, right, well, I'm taking some time off.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it wasn't like a doctor told me, like, you need to take time out or anything like that, but I could just recognize myself. I was a bit like, actually, it was just, I was out of sorts. So, there was a lot of a lot of crying every day, crying for no reason as well, of what I felt was no reason. But I was just absolutely exhausted. And I was literally like, guys, I'm going to take August off. And I swear to God, the team were just literally like, yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
They
Because they
were
can see this
there.
happening, can't they?
100%. They were there like they were literally like, "We've got your back, like, please." At the same time, bless them, another director was going off on mat leave in June, and I was like, "Oh God," but I really wanted to have August off. I just needed it. And I had people on my team actually say, "You have to take it off like this, like, don't worry, like you need this."
And if you've hired good people, they have a capacity to step up. People have, and when you've been managing people for 14 years, by I'm going to step in and I'm going to be able to do it, and I'm helping by doing more and more and more, you don't necessarily see that capacity manifested. But when you have to step away and they go, look, go, what happens, and we'll do our best and we'll sort it out. You see the capacity for people to step up and do things you never expected they could do. Have you seen that?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's been really interesting because like, this wasn't just I'm off, I'm off. So for me, going away meant properly going away. So like, no laptop, like a phone that I barely checked, like proper off grid. And I'd never gone on holiday without a laptop before. I mean, I have memories of being away with my husband and taking a laptop and just writing proposals, or, always being in touch, always being on. And it was proper off. And the team just really like raised the bar. They delivered jobs like brilliantly. Everything, they just really ran it. And one of my sort of manager level members of the team was literally like, "I just wanted you to feel like we could do it." And that's amazing.
And what a gift for them to have that headroom and that capacity to prove to you and to themselves that they could step up and do so much more. What an opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, real opportunity. And we kind of kept, what's been great since I've come back, we've like kept that. It's a bit like, try and keep it at that same level. So um I am a little bit involved at the moment, probably more than would be planned, but that's largely around um capacity, work levels, needing all hands on
That
deck.
happens sometimes.
But that happens. But yeah, it's been really good. And the team like have been fantastic at just carrying the torch, really.
So I think people listening will be going, so what are you doing differently now than you weren't doing before you had that month off? What are you doing to help make sure that carries on? Because you've trained yourself over decades now, running your own business and working in other businesses to behave in a very particular way. So you've got deep rooted habits that caused you to subsidize the success of your business at your own cost. You recognized at this time, you took your break, you've come back, but you haven't rewired all those habits. You can't have done, but maybe you're more aware of them. So what are you doing differently now that you weren't doing before that allows them to continue to thrive and grow and develop, that also allows some pressure to be taken off you? Have you thought about that?
I guess I haven't thought about it specifically. I think firstly, I guess, yeah, I'm a lot more aware of um my life and what I want. So I think before I was just trying to juggle it all. Whereas now, I mean, like, actually my ideal is that I want to be more present for my daughter. I mean, my daughter's now 6, so she's now at school. But like, I want to be there, make sure I'm there for sort of pick up and drop off. I think most days, I'll be dropping her off in the morning, or I'll be picking her up in the afternoon. Like, there's not many times that we have to rely on after school care, which is a really big thing for me. And I used to feel really guilty about. I used to be like, "Oh, I'm leaving work early, a bit early," or "I'm, working from home today because I want to do pick up and drop off," or, on Mondays and Fridays I finish at 3, for example. And I used to feel really guilty about that. Whereas I've parked that now. I'm just like, no, this is what I do, and that's my, you know, I'm choosing to do that and just let go of the guilt. Don't have to clock up hours.
And the consequence of that is if you're feeling better about your business and better about your family and that you're contributing more to both, the consequence is seen by your clients, is seen by your teams, it's seen by your family, because they're getting a better version of Vicki, all of them, which is kind of obvious. But when you're on the treadmill and you're running faster all the time and you're thinking, well, actually, I have to do more, not do less to do more. It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? You have to kind of be recharged. I think also, it sounds absolutely ridiculous now I say it, but at the time it didn't. But I used to be like, I almost give myself a gold star if I hadn't taken all my annual leave. Like, sounds stupid, but yeah, I used to be like, oh, I haven't taken all my annual leave, oh, like it was a thing of a champion.
I've contributed.
Yeah, it was weird. But like now I kind of definitely take all of my annual leave. So I think little things like that, making sure that there is proper downtime, and that you don't end up feeling like you're caught up in this like working motion that kind of feeds you, but also is like eating away at you. You're kind of not able to recharge. And I even look back, even like a couple of years ago, and I used to get to the point where I was so exhausted that I would book a hotel night room for one night and I would go away somewhere. I would stay there for the day and do just by myself and sleep over and then come back and drove into work. And I saw that as my recharge. It was like a plaster, like kind of just, you know, it wasn't, that's not how you relax. And oh, by the way, while I was at that hotel, I would take a notebook and I would be writing down loads of ideas about work. I mean, that's all fine and well and good, but using that as a holiday isn't the right way to do it. And lots of people get lots of really great insights from doing away days, etc. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It was a fact that that was replacing actual time off. So it wasn't, mad.
Lots of what you've been saying and lots in your tone is this slightly embarrassed by the behavior. And yet what you're describing, I can guarantee everyone listening is going, yep, I do. I have a version of that, or I do exactly that, or everyone is doing this. And we're kidding ourselves. It's, when you take a plaster off and it's covered in blood, plaster was not the right solution. I'm trying to take your analogy and probably haven't done it very well, but clearly there's something bigger going on and the plaster's not the answer. We need to do something more serious than that. And I just think almost the embarrassment of talking about this, and thank you so much for sharing it. It's because you've got a thriving business and you do really great work. And so despite all of this, the thing that's created you, out of it comes this incredible agency. So it's not like it's just this sort of decline. It creates strength, doesn't it? This starting to recognize this stuff, taking some time off, having proper holidays, using all of your holiday allowance actually makes your business better and makes it better for everybody in the business and around you. So and yet we have this slightly embarrassed way of talking about some of our behaviors. So I think we have to get past that. And there's I'm really not plugging the book. Sorry, publisher. I don't care if you buy the book or not. But I care if people. What's interesting, twice you mentioned that you took a pause, and just taking a pause and recognizing that you were adding to your emotional overdraft was enough for you to do something slightly different. And that's what I say to so many people is, even if you don't have the answers yet, taking a proper pause and going, right, actually, this feels like, it's a bit embarrassing to even to admit it to myself, but this feels like not helpful behavior. What's going on here? Just stopping and reflecting on that for a moment probably means you'll do something slightly different. And it gives you the chance to do something different and delegate something off or hire someone or take that holiday or just make a better decision. So whether you buy the book or not, I just don't care, listeners. But I do care that you understand what Vicky's telling you here, because we are all doing this most of the time. And if you start changing it, and it sounds like Vicky is not, no one would claim to be the perfect example of how how you can run a business where it isn't at your own cost, but you're now taking your holiday, which is huge, a huge thing. I've had clients who wouldn't take half term off because they had a young team with young kids who they felt ought to have that time with their children. And when I persuaded this client to speak to the team and say, I think we need a rota so we take half terms off in turn. The team all went, oh, thank God for that. How is it taking you this long? They wanted this person to spend time with his kids. They wanted him to recover and rest and recuperate, because when he comes back after a break, he's a much better manager and he's a much better leader and he's got better thinking and it's more fun to be at work with. And he felt, don't go on half term. Don't go on half term.
I could see myself in that situation as well, but because I do think there's this kind of, that Simon Sinek approach of leaders eat like last. And I do think there's a lot of good in that, but I also think there's a lot of damage in that. And I think you can take that message in the wrong way, especially if you're like me, where it's a bit like everyone else first and serve me last. I'll kind of, I've at times of, taken the lowest salary, I've, taken the least holiday. It's this kind of, to feel like it has to be on me, that whole approach. But yeah,
it's brilliant. And we've got our headline there, by the way, Vicky, which is Vicky says cynic is wrong. So thank you, Vicky. That's
oh God,
we're in there. So something you mentioned right back at the start, as I said, we come back to. I didn't name it as balance at the time, but it was basically about balance. And what you've been saying since is I don't like the term work-life balance because it suggests that work and life are something different. I think there's work and lifestyle balance is legitimate. But you've been talking about basically how you're balancing up this joy you get from your work, this empowering thrill you get from doing amazing work with amazing brands, with amazing people, but also the need to be there for your daughter and to be present as a mother and see your friends. You said you stopped seeing your friends and all the other things you need to do. Is there anything else you could share that you're doing that allows you, what disciplines or what changes in habits are you trying to sort of pursue that allow you to bring a bit more balance to this, where the outcome is you're going to feel better and therefore be better at everything?
I mean, the interesting thing is I think it often comes down to just fundamentals. So exercise, for example, I never used to do anything for me. Now it's about, right, okay, I'm really got into reformer Pilates recently. I just really love it. So, I make sure I'm going to classes. I make sure I stop. And it's the little things. I really do believe that if you can change lots of little things, it really adds up. Um, it sounds like a really trivial home thing, but it's unloading the dishwasher. So the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I go into the kitchen and I start doing chores. So I will sit there and I won't sit there, sorry. My husband will, wake up and do stuff for him, like stretching. He's a really good portrait painter. So sometimes he's painting portraits, which is a hobby of his, in the kitchen, or he'll make himself some breakfast. The first thing I do is we're like programmed into chores. I start unloading the dishwasher and cleaning up and, putting a wash on and all that kind of stuff. And I've actually stopped myself doing that. So I'll wake up and I have to actually I'll open the dishwasher and then this morning I kind of, oh no, close it again. We can do that tonight when we get home. If you haven't had time to do it, and actually I've got to get Marnie to breakfast club and then I've got to get in a tray and I've got to get to work. I actually don't really, this isn't something I want to do or have time to do. Let's prioritize everything else. This can wait. It's constantly checking yourself. And that's a tiny thing, but it's all those little things add up.
It's tiny increments. But again, you're catching yourself and going, That's about habit change. And like you say, they are so prosaic, these things. They're so small, but they kind of build on each other. And any of the good books about habit, and I wouldn't recommend one, but there are loads of good books
The
about building
atomic
new
one, isn't
habits.
there? Yeah.
Atomic Habits, and my Tiny Habits is the book that he took most of that from as well, which is a great read.
Okay.
Really good book as well. I mean, I don't mean he took it. I mean, his thinking was very
Inspired
informed,
by.
inspired by it. Yeah. But that talks about doing something small every time. And my publisher's, she's run every day for 6 years, over 2,000 days. She's run every single day, and she runs a publishing company. She's publishing 3 books a month. She's an astonishingly bright, busy, driven individual, but she runs every day. And she defines a run as, I think, 2 kilometers. So it's not 10 miles, but she started that by putting her trainers by the front door. And she said, if my trainers are by the front door, then I've got to step over them to get to the kitchen. So I've got no excuse, and then I'm going to do it. And it's those tiny little changes. And she does it wherever she's in the world. She'll go for, every single day for over 6 years now, which is amazing.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
when people say to me, I don't have time to do exercise, that's just not true. It's not true. And it's so important, physically looking after yourself. And I badger my clients. I was talking to someone actually on one of these podcasts a little while ago, Anthony Mayfield, and he said he'd love to get back into yoga. He did a lot of yoga and had stopped and was busy again, and he kind of knew he should be doing it. So I said, well, I'll challenge you then. I'll challenge you. You do some yoga and I'll take up Pilates, which my wife does. And I do lots of work in the gym, but I don't do stretching. And so I signed up for a online Pilates thing, and I started over Christmas. And I do need to phone Anthony up and check that he started his yoga. But because you can fit it in somewhere, you can, even if you've got kids, even if you're crazy busy, even if work is mad, you have time to look after yourself. Because if you don't, you'll break, and then you don't have the choice. Then you will stop. And maybe hidden in there was a tiny thing as well about accountability. So do you have anyone who helps you stay accountable? Do you have anyone who says to you, they may not use the words emotional overdraft, but who says, are you getting too deep in your emotional overdraft? Is there anyone you talk to about this?
I guess my husband to a certain extent. But yeah, I don't have anyone else that is saying that. Like, obviously, I think my team have kind of said it when I wanted to go away, and they said, we really want you to go away. I think that's them being like, we can see it. You're exhausted, and please take some time out. So I think there's people doing it in subtle ways, I would say, but I haven't got an obvious sort of, a lot of business owners have sort of mentors and things like that, don't they? I don't have anyone like that in that sort of role at the moment. That is,
those people definitely help, coaches and mentors.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I'm thinking about the personal board. So this idea of having some people who, you have a board in a company with an FD and a operations person and an MD, but you can have your personal board, and this is someone who is your cheerleader, whose the job is just to be there in your corner, not to give you advice, not to tell you how to do your job, just to go, you are bloody great, and you're doing your best and you're smashing it. And everyone needs one of those. But you could have a cheerleader, you could have a fitness coach, so you could have a personal trainer or something. You could have a mentor, you could have a coach. You could have a peer, so someone else who does the same job as you, who you could just phone up and talk to occasionally. So that there are different people who you can build out onto your board. I'd really encourage you to think about that, because the accountability is really helpful. I think just checking in and going, Anthony and I'm not on Anthony's personal board in any way, but I promised I'd check up and make sure he was doing his yoga. And this conversation has reminded me to do that. So just if someone phoned you up and said, are you still doing the dishwasher in the morning? And you go, no, I'm not. I'm sticking with it. That's a really helpful thing, I think, just to know that someone else is looking out for you.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I don't have that. I have lots of different people who are cheerleaders, but they don't necessarily hold me accountable. That makes sense. So I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, and I'll definitely think about trying how I can get that.
They can give people permission to have that conversation with you, and then they feel they can.
Yes.
And it's a very flattering thing to be asked by someone to say, can you stand with me and help me do this thing I know I need to do for the good of my family and my social life and my business. Anyway, it's just a thought. So business is thriving now. I always finish this conversation with a question, which is emotional overdraft is about 10 simple changes, and we always say simple but not easy. If you have a simple change that you would share with everyone listening, I have a sneaking suspicion I know what it is. We may have already touched on
it. We have already touched on it. I think just the basic thing of taking all your annual leave and properly taking it and switching off. I mean, there's a million things that I could say, because I do believe there's lots of little things, but I'd say that's probably the biggie. And certainly if any of my staff have any annual leave left over, I'm quite, when are you going to book it? Are you going to take it? Yeah, we
because
can
it's
carry
got a
it
purpose,
on.
hasn't it? It's got rolling 10 days over to the next year means you haven't recharged properly this year, and we don't want that. That's fantastic. So we've got everything here, dear listener. We've got everything from take your whole damn holiday to don't unload the dishwasher in the morning if you could do something better with your time, which is great advice. Really good advice. It's been fantastic talking to you. I mean, we could go on and on because I think there's an awful lot more we could explore here, but we have to stop at some point. Vicki, you've been brilliant and so generous with what you've shared. So is there anything else you think that people should be thinking about at this point?
I think if my only thinking was that when you are if you are at the moment kind of feeling like you're really stressed out, that you're failing in any way, and that you actually may be having some sort of burnout issues, you feel like you're not being 100% and you're showing those signs of just absolute exhaustion. I think the thing that I found most helpful was knowing that I wasn't alone. And I think that would be that it's particularly in business owners, and particularly over the past year, what's really helped me is chatting to other people and being like, oh my God, I feel the same. It was like this sort of understanding that other people going through it just really helped. So would just be talk to other groups. There's loads of like peer groups, particularly in agency land. And again, I don't know where most of your listeners are listening in from, but certainly in my sphere of creative agencies, there's lots of networking groups that are phenomenal at going along to meeting other business owners who are in the same field, who are actually, when you really get to talk to them properly, not your get over the peripheral, how you doing? We're doing really well. Well, we're just, you get under the hood and you find out that actually what happens on social media is the best bits of someone's life, not necessarily their life. And there's a persona that acts there. And once you actually get talking to people at these events, you get under the hoods and they become not that person that's absolutely flying and has just set up a new studio and has just hired 10 staff. You get to hear the true story, which isn't always kind of smelling of roses. It's the true story in a weird way that I think that makes everything feel a lot more human and a lot more relatable and makes yourself feel a bit more grounded in a way. So that's what I've kind of has really helped me, I guess, through the challenging times.
So many things I thought about. I can't add anything to that to improve on it. That's brilliant advice. Vicki, if people want to find out more about you or more about your business, where do they go?
Just to our website. So it's Nalla, nalla.co.uk. Or you find me on LinkedIn and connect. It's Vicki Young. If you put Vicki Young Nalla, I'm sure I'll pop up. There can't be many of us with that in the search title.
And if there are mums who are running businesses who who are feeling like you were feeling? Are you happy for people to get in touch?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's hard enough running a business, and then you've got to throw mother into it, and it's a whole new world. So yeah, absolutely. If there's anything I can do to help, and I'm actually doing a talk about that exact thing, about balancing agency ownership with motherhood at the end of January as well. So
And they'll be able to find that via your LinkedIn, I assume, at
yeah,
that
it'll be on
point.
my LinkedIn, and it's with agency hackers. It is a talk that they've asked me to do at one of their events on the 31st of January.
Outstanding. Vicki, thank you so much. Wasn't Vicki great? Wasn't she great? I really genuinely could have carried that conversation on for a very long time. She had so much to share, and I think there's more in there. And I enjoyed the fact that she was almost exploring her coping techniques for her emotional overdraft whilst we were talking. So again, it shows this idea of making some time. If you can make a bit of time to reflect on your emotional overdraft, spot it, and then find some time to reflect, you do things differently. And this great advice to don't unload your dishwasher in the morning if you're just doing that because you feel you have to. It's given me total permission to do that. So that's going on my list now. So what were the takeaways for me from that? What do I want to encourage you to pick out of that? I mean, the first one's really obvious, which is that thing about holidays. Maybe you were listening to that thinking, well, it's all well and good, Vicki and Andy going, yeah, take all your holiday, but we're bloody busy and I can't. And I just want you to trust me when I say you can and you must. The point in holiday is that it gives you time to rest and recuperate and to recharge. And you know this because you would encourage all your staff to do that. And you wouldn't dream of encouraging them to take 5 days a year or whatever it is. You wouldn't. So it's no different with you. And working out how you can design your business, so deliberately designing your business so that you are able to take time away, is something I would encourage you to look at now. If you're struggling to take all your holiday, I'd encourage you to look at that now. So what do you have to do in the design of your business to allow you to take that time off? Who needs to take some things off you? What things do you not need to be doing? What else could you be doing a different way? What processes could you put in place? All the stuff I talk about in the book. But I thought that was such a huge sort of canary in the coal mine for your emotional overdraft. If you're not taking a holiday, then work out a way that you can. So I thought that was the first thought I had. The second one was the difference between Vicki's burnout the first time and the second time. Well, she didn't have the burnout the second time, but it was starting, was that it decided when she had to take some time off first time. And the second time, she decided when to take some time off. And that's huge progress across 14 years. And it occurs to me that's it's not ideal to get to the point where you are burning out. But if you are, then recognizing that and doing something about it is better than just pretending it's not happening or ignoring it or hoping it'll go away. Because if you're in your emotional overdraft for too long, you're drawing too hard, you're borrowing against all that wellness, it will catch up with you in the end. So I think even if you are, and we all do to a greater or lesser extent, dipping into your emotional overdraft to the point where you're approaching a burnout or an overwhelm or stress, take control of that situation if you possibly can. Get some help, get some advice, do the personal board, get a coach, get a mentor, whatever it is you need, but do something to help you actively do something rather than wait till it happens to you. I think that's really important to recognize that. And the other thing that came out of that point when Vicki was talking, and I didn't want to interrupt her flow of thoughts, but we touched on it, which is this idea of making yourself redundant in your own business. If you run a team, but particularly if you're a founder, and that's what we were talking about today, what can you do so that your team, your business could continue if you weren't there? If you had no choice, or if you wanted the choice not to be there. And I have a client who wanted to take August off with his family. And so we spent a year designing the business so he could specifically take that time off. So how could you look at your role and change your relationship to that role to the point where it is actually possible for you to take the proper time off? So this is the pre-end. They're related points, all of these 3 points. But it's before that even happens, you could design into your business the possibility of you taking time off. But as I mentioned, you might need different people, or some people doing different roles, or some different processes happening, or some different changing client expectations, changing team expectations, moving management to other people. There's hundreds of things, and I do discuss this at length in the book, actually. But if you can design your business so that it doesn't need you to be there all the time, so that you can take the time off to recover, so you can take the time off to recuperate, to rest, to thrive, to spend time with your family, your friends, your hobbies, then you can do anything. And if you're saying, yeah, Andy, that's fine. For some people, that's great, but I'm too busy. It's too much work. We haven't got enough money. I can't afford to do that. Then all you are doing is continuing to subsidize your business at your own cost. And at some point, that will manifest itself in the most unhelpful way at probably the most unhelpful time. So I'd really encourage you to work out how you can plan that out of your business and plan that out of your life. So brilliant, Vicki. So generous, so thoughtful at the end, offering to help as well. And if you're at the point where you're feeling overwhelmed or feeling that burnout is approaching, and the last thing you want to do is buy a book and do some more reading, because who the hell has time to do that? Drop me a line. I'm happy to help where I can, if that's going to help you. But don't let it get to the point of burnout, and don't let it break you. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was one that you enjoyed, and that you can take something from. And I look forward to speaking to you again on Exploring Emotional Overdraft.